Hello everybody, this is Connor at BoatsDon'tSink here with another Shadowverse Evolve deck profile. Today we're going to be looking at another deck from BP03 Flame of Lævateinn. This is going to be the Fable Haven deck. First off, what is Fable? Fable is an archetype that was introduced in BP03 Flame of Lævateinn. It's spread across all 6 classes, with each class getting a legendary based around various fairy tales such as Beauty and the Beast, Jabberwock, Alice in Wonderland, etc. And all of these are held together by neutral support, focused with Alice as sort of the head of all of the Fable archetypes. Forest, Sword, and Haven are the classes that focus on this the most, actually making use of the trait with a lot of their cards. So today we're going to be looking at how Haven can use these cards to make a really powerful deck. So moving into the deck list itself, a reminder before we take a look at it that this is meant to be a starting point to work off of and might not be fully optimized for any specific meta. You should test it for yourself and make any changes that you find necessary to suit your playstyle or meta differences. With that said, let's jump into it. So here's the deck list. As we've seen with a lot of these set 3 decks, we are playing a lot of 3-ofs. I believe it's 12 3-ofs here with 2 2-ofs to round out the 40. We just really want a lot of consistency. I think that's really important in the game right now, especially with the mulligan system. We really want to be able to mulligan okay hands and be confident that we're going to get hands that are at least as good, if not better, back. So the decks need to have lots of 3-ofs, lots of consistency, and we're going for that here. We also, the way this strategy is going to work out, as you'll see, we do just want as much consistency as possible, period. Our Evolve deck also really straightforward, just 3-ofs and 2-ofs, not spreading it too wide like some of the other decks do. Taking a look at our curve, you can still see that I believe 34 of the cards here cost 3 and lower, so just really low to the ground. This is, as strange as it sounds for a Haven deck with this many, with 8 spells and 12 amulets, this is kind of an aggro deck. Which will make a little more sense as we read through some of the cards. But yeah, 20 followers, and then half our deck is followers, half our deck is spells and amulets. A lot of these are just setup pieces for kind of our one way to win the game. First card we have is 3 copies of Actress Faria. This is a 1-cost 2/2. We can engage to select another Fable follower on the field and put a Fable counter on it. There are only 2 followers in our deck that are going to make use of Fable counters, those being Princess Snow White and the Tin Soldier. Snow White, when she goes to the cemetery as last words, if she has a Fable counter, it goes back to your EX area instead, letting you reuse her. And Tin Soldier can remove Fable counters from himself to deal damage to any enemy follower or leader. So one of those is going to be a good way to sustain against aggressive decks early. The other is our finisher, that's going to close out the game a large portion of the time. Faria can fuel both of these, while also acting as a 1-cost 2/2, which is a pretty aggressive stat line early that can start punching in for damage until we need her effect. Second card we have is Bellringer Angel. Not something you're typically going to see in aggro decks, but it lets us draw cards and protect against opposing aggro decks, which is kind of why it's here. Obviously, 1-cost 0/2, ward, last words draw a card. Super staple card for a lot of decks since set 1. We are playing 2 copies of the evolved Bellringer Angel, which is more than you'll normally see. Since our evolved deck has a lot of empty space in it, we're able to do this. And the 2 damage from evolving is actually super relevant. A lot of decks like Sword playing 2/2s, or even Forest playing various 2 defense followers. Or just 1 defense followers that you can use this to get rid of in the early game, can help protect your life total in combination with ward. Moving into spells at 1 cost, we have Dark Offering. This is 1-cost quick timing. Select a card on your field, destroy it, give your leader +3 defense, and draw a card. Since we do have a number of amulets that are rather expensive to sack off or might not give us a lot of value to sack off, this is a way to remove them from our board and clear up space, while also gaining defense for our leader and drawing extra cards. In addition, since we are going to be discarding our hand with our main evolve effect, if this card's ever in your hand and you have extra play points, you can just kind of run it out to get some extra life before discarding your hand, which helps you, again, sustain against aggressive decks, which are going to be our main weakness here. Otherwise, at any point, you can use this to sack off like a bell ringer in the early game, just to draw a bunch of cards and try to find your setup pieces, etc. First amulet we have is Sacred Plea. This has been a staple in Haven since set 1. It's just 1 cost amulet, engage, send to cemetery to draw a card, or pay 2, engage, and send to cemetery to draw 2 cards. We really just like this for extra card advantage. It's a good turn 1 play just to sort of get it on the board. It's pretty much, as I said, we're discarding our hand with Humpty Dumpty, so being able to have this to draw cards back to our hand after discarding it is going to really open up a lot of extra lines of play for us and make sure that we don't just run out of gas when it matters. The next amulet we're playing is the Will to Overtake from the Umamusume booster. This is another 1 cost amulet. Fanfare, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put any number from among them on top of your deck in any order, and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. If this were a Magic the Gathering card, it would read Scry 3. This is just really good, mainly turn 1, but also as the game goes on and even after you've discarded your hand, to guarantee that you're going to be able to draw good cards off the top of your deck. Since we're also going to be playing out of our EX area a decent bit, even if you have 0 cards in hand and draw this as your only card, it's usually fine. You can play it, make sure that next turn you'll be drawing a good card, and then use the rest of your play points for cards out of your EX area. And it can make just really strong turns that way. If you have to, you can pay to engage it and sack it to draw a card, though you'd much rather be using Dark Offering to get rid of it than its own effect, just for more value overall. At 2 cost, we have Princess Snow White, a 2 cost 2/2, which is decent for aggression. Curving like Faria into this can, you know, it's getting some damage in. You have 2 2/2s. Your opponent has to start answering them if they don't want to take a bunch of damage. It also has a ward, so once you've attacked with it, it's going to protect your leader's defense that way. Fanfare, when put onto the field from your hand, put a Fable counter on it. If it's from anywhere other than your hand, it's going to get +1/+1 instead. Last words, if this has a Fable counter, put this card into the EX area. So you can play this card on 2. On 3, you can attack with it, have ward. If they get rid of it, it's going to go back to your EX area, and the next time you play it, it'll be a 3/3 instead of a 2/2. And, you know, you attack for 3, and then you get ward again. So it can keep protecting you over and over again. We do have a few ways to get Fable counters on it other than its own Fanfare, which means that if we play it from our EX area and have one of these, we can get a 3/3 and put a Fable counter back on it, which means that once it goes to EX area, or once it dies again, even as a 3/3, it'll go back to EX area and we can play it once more. Faria is going to be able to do that, Alice is going to be able to move counters, and Pinion Prince, with its effect to put a Fable card from Cemetery into EX area, can also place an additional Fable counter on it. One of the main reasons I really like this card in the deck is because Humpty Dumpty, our main evolve, deals 5 damage to all of both players' followers, which is usually going to wipe both boards. If we have a Snow White with a Fable counter on our board when we do this, instead of losing the value entirely, it'll go back to our EX area, giving us a somewhat decent follow-up play with ward. Next, we have 2 copies of Surefire Bullet. This can really be any number of removal spells, but I think Surefire Bullet is probably the best for the current environment. 2 cost quick timing, select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 3 damage. If it's an if it is an evolved follower, deal 4 damage instead. Alice Wonderland Explorer is going to be in a lot of decks. It has 3 defense unevolved and 4 evolved, which makes it a perfect target for Surefire Bullet, as well as Floral Fencer, which is a mainstay in all of the sword decks, especially the new Heroic Sword, which, you know, 4/4, and it's in an aggressive deck, which, as I mentioned, is our sort of main weakness, as the decks that can try to get under us and kill us before we set up. So being able to remove Floral Fencer for 2 play points can really put a hindrance in their plans, especially if we also have, say, a Bellringer or a Snow White to ward up against the rest of their followers. Our amulet 2 cost is Alice's Adventure. Fanfare, search your deck for a Fable card, reveal it, and add it to your hand. This is going to be able to get any Fable card in our deck, which is super powerful. Makes it a great draw once we have 0 cards in hand, since we can just turn it into anything we want. In addition, pay 1, engage, send to Cemetery, select a Fable follower on field, and give it both Rush and Assail. Which means if we're playing multiple followers in a turn, sometimes late game, and need to clear multiple threats on the opponent's board, we can evolve one and sack Alice's Adventure for the other in order for them to both attack. Usually you're not going to use that effect though, and it's another reason why Dark Offering is pretty good in the deck, since Dark Offering can turn Alice's Adventure into a new card off the top of your deck. Next we have the main Fable card of the set, Alice Wonderland Explorer, the glue that holds all of these decks together. 3-cost 3/3, Fanfare, put a Fable counter on this card. Activate ability, remove a Fable counter from this card to put a Fable counter on a follower on your field or in your EX area. We're mainly going to be using this for, as I said, Snow White and Tin Soldier. Snow White is kind of interesting since if you play it and it gets its last words effect to go to the EX area, you can actually use Alice to just go ahead and put a counter on it while it's there instead of having to wait to play it again. Same with Tin Soldier. One of the win conditions of the deck is often going to be getting a Tin Soldier into the EX area and just stacking up counters on it until it has enough to kill your opponent. Or trying to just get as many counters on it in one turn to sort of burst your opponent down. We can pay 1 to evolve, which is going to turn us into a 4/4. On evolve, look at the top 4 cards of your deck. You may put up to 2 Fable cards from among them into your EX area. Put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. We're playing 3 copies of this because since we're going to have no hand after using Humpty Dumpty, we want as many good cards in our EX area as possible to effectively use it as our hand and keep playing the game. We do have 9 different Fable trait targets in here, comprising a total, I believe that's what, 9 times 3, 20, so 26 slots in our deck. Are Fable trait, so over half of our deck. It's pretty common that you're going to be able to actually get 2 cards out of the top 4. Occasionally you'll miss, but usually not. Some of these aren't fantastic to get out of it, but most of them serve a pretty important role in the deck, and you can be decently happy as long as you're getting 2 cards, since even the ones that seem less useful, like Actress Faria, can sit there in your EX area until the end of the game and serve the purpose of putting extra counters on, say, a Tin Soldier in order to remove your opponent's last life at the end. So this is also a reason we play 3, is since these can put each other in the EX area and we do have ways to recur them, it's pretty easy to go through 3 evolves, even only seeing 1 or 2 copies of Alice herself in your hand. Moving on to really the main card of the deck, and why a lot of people refer to this deck as Egg Haven rather than Fable Haven. Though I'll talk about why I don't think that needs to be the case in a bit. This is Humpty Dumpty. He's a neutral follower, so he can go in any deck, though Haven is pretty much unanimously decided as his best home. He's a 3/3 that evolves for 0. He evolves into a 4/4. I don't know why they decided to still give him extra stats, even though he evolves for 0. On evolve, deal 5 damage to each follower on the field. That's both yours and your opponent's. Deal 3 damage to the enemy leader, and discard your hand. This is an incredibly powerful effect since it is going to wipe the boards clean. This is great against an opponent that's committed a lot of resources to the board, since it's going to get rid of all their followers pretty much, and also put 3 damage into the opponent's face. If you can go through all 3 of these in a game, which you usually won't, but sometimes will happen, that's 9 damage to your opponent, meaning you only need to find 11 more somewhere. Downside being that you do have to discard your hand, which is why we have so many cards that are either putting things into our EX area, or getting extra cards off the top, or getting cards back out of our cemetery. We need ways to play the game after we discard our hand, especially since aggressive decks are going to force us to fire this off a lot earlier than we would like, just in order to clear their board and preserve our life total. The nice thing is that because we do have all these amulets and EX area cards, we don't destroy these when we deal 5 damage to everything. So using the early turns of the game to set up amulets that can convert into more cards later means that Humpty Dumpty is going to set your opponent back a lot further than it's going to set you. Moving into our next 3-drop, we have Tin Soldier. I think this card is equally as important to the deck as Humpty Dumpty, and why the Fable trait as a whole better represents the deck than the Egg. There's a 3-cost 3/4 Fanfare. When put onto the field from anywhere other than your hand, put a Fable counter on it. Activated ability, remove a Fable counter from this card to deal 2 damage to any enemy leader or follower on the field. So we actually have a lot of ways to put this onto our field from other than our hand, unlike the Forest deck, where Beauty and the Beast was only ever coming from EX area. We can actually get Tin Soldier into play from the EX area, from our deck, or from our cemetery. With Alice Wonderland Explorer and Pinion Prince both putting him into the EX area, and March Hare's Tea Time having 2 separate effects, one of which pulls from the deck and the other the cemetery. It's a lot of ways to get extra counters on Tin Soldier, in addition to Alice herself being able to move counters and actress Faria being able to place counters, allowing us to stack up even more to deal, 4, 6, or 8 damage even to our opponent in a single turn with 1 Tin Soldier, which is kind of our goal for closing out the game after we've done 6 or 9 damage with Humpty Dumpty. Another one of our tools to both control the board and our opponent's defense total, 3-cost Explosion spell. Deal X damage to each follower on the field and each enemy leader. X equals the number of cards named Explosion or Humpty Dumpty in your cemetery, plus 1. So with 3 copies of each of these, that caps out at 6 potential damage, though oftentimes this will be dealing 3, maybe 4. That's still a lot. Doing 4 to the board, 4 to your opponent's face can end the game rather quickly, since it'll often leave them with no followers. And, 20% of a defense total is a lot, especially when added on the Humpty Dumpty evolves themselves. So this is a great way to just sort of keep clearing the board even after you've fired off Humpty Dumpty. It's always something nice to have sitting in your EX area as a potential tool to threaten your opponent with. Our last amulet of the deck is the 4-cost March Hare's Tea Time. This is by far the most powerful consistency tool in the deck and card advantage tool, and why I have chosen this card's art as the video thumbnail here. It really is just the biggest piece of glue that holds everything together, probably even more so than Alice. Fanfare, look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You may put a Fable follower that costs 5 play points or less from among them onto your field. Put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. 5 cost or less is, spoiler alert, all of our Fable followers. So this gets us any follower other than Bellringer, really, out of our top 5, which is a lot to look at. If we can find Tin Soldier, he's going to get an extra counter. If we find Humpty Dumpty, we can blow him up. If we find Alice, we can evolve her to get even more cards. Turning March Hare's Tea Time into an Alice, which is already like a +1, into evolving Alice and getting 2 more cards. You just can't run out of resources even though you're discarding your hand, and it's kind of ridiculous. Second effect is that we can pay to engage and send this card to owner's cemetery in order to choose a Fable follower that costs 3 play points or less from cemetery and put it onto the field directly. 3 play points or less is actually still all of the same followers except for Pinion Prince. And again, this is another way to get back Tin Soldiers. This is especially nice since we have to discard our hand with Humpty Dumpty. If we have any additional Humpty Dumptys or Alices or Tin Soldiers in our hand at the time we fire off the evolve, this gives us a way to get them back out of the cemetery and reuse them. It also means that our opponent is basically never safe from Tin Soldier lethal as long as we have March Hare's Tea Time on board, since we can buy it back and start putting counters on it with whatever else we have. In addition, sometimes if you're able to play, say, Pinion Prince, get Tin Soldier into EX area, or just have a Tin Soldier in EX area, Tea Time can turn into either an Alice or Faria in order to put extra counters on Tin Soldier for 2 play points. Last card we have is Pinion Prince. This is a 5 cost, rounding out our curve. It's a 4/5 stat Fanfare. Select a Fable card in your cemetery, put it into your EX area. You may put a Fable counter on it. Since this one says card, this can actually get anything. This can get any of the amulets if we need to search for specific cards, or if we need to spin the tea time wheel to try to find something good off the top. This can put a Humpty Dumpty in our EX area. This can put a Tin Soldier in the EX area with an additional Fable counter already. So Pinion Prince into Tin Soldier is 8 play points that you don't have to spend all at once. You can spend 5 on one turn, 3 the next, for effectively 4 storm damage, plus however much else you can put counters onto the Tin Soldier. So a common line is using Pinion Prince. Just set up a Tin Soldier in the EX area with guaranteed 2 counters. And then as soon as you find multiple copies of either Faria or Alice, you can push up the Tin Soldier and just fire off, 8 or 10 damage at a single time. It's also nice that it can grab the Explosion spell, since later in the game, when Pinion Prince will probably be coming down, Explosion might be at 4, 5, 6 damage even, and being able to buy that back and play Explosion in the same turn can feel super powerful. Only downside is that you are likely killing your 5-cost Pinion Prince in the process, unless it's only dealing 4. Or 5 if we evolve. We can pay 1 to evolve into a 5/6 with Assail. So being able to deal 5 and live at 1 is actually super powerful. This also lives Humpty Dumpty's evolve effect on its own. Otherwise, this is pretty much just here, since we have the evolve deck space, and this card's unevolved form is good enough to run 3 of anyway. Having Assail lets us clear out refreshed followers that might be too big for Humpty Dumpty to kill. We can attack into, say, Beauty and the Beast as a 5/7 to sort of soften it up before we fire off any Explosions or Humpty Dumpty evolves later. Anything like that. Looking at the deck as a whole, I do think it might be a little hard to tell just from looking at this how many different lines that this deck has to get where it wants to go. With all of the top checking from Alice and Tea Time, the deck control with Will to Overtake, being able to add things back out of your cemetery with Tea Time, all the searching with Alice's Adventure, we really do just almost always have access to any card we want at any given time. I think that does push this to probably, if not the best deck in the format, quite close to it. Some of the pros that we're looking at, obviously the card advantage and consistency I keep talking about. Otherwise, most of your sources of damage can't actually be interacted with. Whereas other decks are killing the opponent by attacking them, we're actually mostly doing it with effect damage, either Humpty Dumpty's evolve effect, Explosion's spell effect, or Tin Soldier's activated ability. We only have to attack very infrequently in order to close out the game. Though we are often attacking early in the game to put our opponent at a lower life total for our effect damage. We're usually not giving them quick timings when it matters for them to save themselves. And the last upside here is that we can clear wide boards with incredible ease. Even decks like Heroic Sword that can make almost entire boards off of 1 card in hand pretty much entirely fall to our Humpty Dumptys. These wide decks usually don't go over 5 defense, and even if they do, Humpty plus 1 other card is going to be enough for whatever lone follower tends to survive. Uma Musume, making its board, usually doesn't break 5 defense until the second turn, so really just powerful against all these decks that want to go big and wide. Less useful against the decks that want to go tall, so Dragon can be an issue sometimes, but even then, they have a lot of 5/5s, so we can clear pretty much anything. Downsides of the deck are the blatant one. Humpty Dumpty makes us discard our hand, so we're spending most of the game just playing off the top of the deck, which, as a result, means we need to set up other advantage engines. Barchair's Tea Time, Alice filling our EX area before we fire off the egg. If we're doing all of this, it's unlikely that we have as much time to answer the things our opponent is doing, which makes us weak to early aggression. Decks that can sort of flood the board and push you and force you into a position of having to evolve Humpty Dumpty before you're ready can pretty much be the biggest downfall of the deck. Though even in those matchups, because of the Dark Offerings gaining you extra defense and Bellringer and Snow White having a ward, you can often still just take some damage early and have enough tools to survive later in the game. The hardest part for this is if your opponent somehow manages to play aggressive with like Dragon and has big Storm followers like Ogre, Cap, and Forte at the end. That can prove problematic. Silence Suzuka in Forest. Though, we do still have the 2 Surefire bullets for that, but you can't entirely rely on them when you're playing with like 1 card in hand. Before we go, I want to look at some other cards that might be potential options for the deck. As I said, Surefire Bullet can pretty much be any removal spell that you want. Angelic Snipe and Blackened Scripture are going to be your best other options. Blackened Scripture being a banish effect means your opponent's not going to get whatever last words they have. This can be useful against new cards like Demonium in Abyss to stop him from gaining your opponent defense back. Or Bellringer Angel just to prevent card draw in things like the Mirror. However, I think if you're going to swap off of Surefire Bullet, Angelic Snipe might be better, just because it is 1 cost, which means at times like turn 2, you're going to be able to play both Angelic Snipe and an Amulet onto the board. And many of the early plays that are pushing you fast are only going to have 2 defense anyway. The 3 number does not hit many things between 2 and 4. The other main card I want to look at is Odette White Swan. This is often part of the top end in these decks. Fanfare give 2 defense to your leader and each other follower on your field, as well as Last Words do the same thing, 2 defense to leader and each follower on your field. This card, giving extra defense, is very Haven. You see this a lot in like the defense decks with cards like Almirage and Lelia. However, here, 2 is actually a super good number. Odette on her own already has 6 defense, and giving +2 pushes our evolved Humpty Dumptys to 6. It pushes our evolved Alices to 6. It pushes our Tin Soldiers to 6, and it pushes our unevolved Pinion Princes to 7. Importance of those numbers: they're all bigger than 5, which means if we evolve Humpty Dumpty, our own followers are going to survive the effect. Meaning we can attack with them the next turn, we can just keep them up, force our opponent to not only try to rebuild their board, but also answer what few things we still have standing, which can put extra pressure on the opponent and win us the game that way. The defense gain to leader is also relevant. Again, aggressive decks are the biggest problem, so if you have to take too much damage early, Odette can gain you that defense back. It's also notable that she's a 5 cost, which means she is a target that we can grab off of March Hare's Tea Time Fanfare effect, getting this out as early as turn 4, just to sort of get us a head start on gaining defense and putting a sort of threat on the board that the opponent has to answer while we try to do the rest of our setting up. Taking a look here at the deck as a whole once again, you can check out the deck log at 89CV, the code in the bottom right there. And here is our evolved deck one last time. And that's about it for this deck. I'm definitely looking forward to testing this deck some more. It's been super powerful for me thus far, and I might make some more changes to it, but the consistency and power and just the absolute garbage turns you can pull out of like just nowhere with all your top checks and recursion to kill your opponent when they thought they had the game. It's incredibly powerful. So again, thank you for watching. We'll be back with more set 3 decks next time. Until then, you should be able to watch any of the videos on the screen in front of you. Thank you. Make sure to give a like, comment, subscribe. If there's any decks that you want to see me cover in the future, make sure to let me know below. And we'll see you then.